I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I didn't know what it was. I hated shots. I have 3 other siblings, so there's 4 of us total. And it's kind of funny looking back at it now, but you know, when you're a child and you have to get your shots at the doctor's office, I was the one child out of all of us who would have to be held down or try to run out from getting shots when it was my turn. So, and now I'm doing them myself. It's kind of wild how it turned, 360.
Welcome to the Type 1 and Midlife podcast. My name is Melissa Slem, a certified nutritional health coach and the founder and CEO of Abundant Health with Melissa, where I help women with type 1 diabetes to feel more empowered and live their best life despite their diagnosis. Each week, I will bring conversations and strategies from guest experts and my experience living with type 1 for over 40 years now. So if you're a woman ready to redefine how diabetes can look and feel for you, then the Type 1 and Midlife podcast is the show for you. Well, today I welcome Mattie Fisher. She's a T1D warrior for 23 years now. She was diagnosed at age 12, and she's been managing diabetes with the Inpen, a smart insulin pen. And today she sheds light on her choice of injections over an insulin pump. And we dive into her shift to a 70% plant-based lifestyle in 2020. And she does add in some occasional fish or chicken in there to get that protein in. So learn more about that and how she navigates that. And she's an active diabetes advocate on social media. And Mattie is here to share her valuable insights on what she's learned during her journey with T1D. And our conversation explores life with type 1 diabetes and the reasons why we both prefer, at this point, multiple daily injections, better known as MDI. So how we navigate the site rotations, the basal rates, and learn about the perks of the smart insulin pen that we both love. And Mattie, she really tells us a little bit more about the impact of plant-based diet and her specific journey and how it has helped her to reach a better insulin sensitivity. So join us for all the details of both of our MDI experiences. So if you're curious as to why we choose this insulin therapy, this is the show for you. And if you want to connect with Mattie, just find the link right here in the show notes, and we hope you enjoy the show. Nothing you hear on this Type 1 and Midlife podcast should be a substitute for professional medical advice. Please always consult your doctor before changing your diet, insulin dosages, or healthcare plan. Well, hello and welcome. I am happy to meet a new friend here today, or introduce a new friend here with you all today. Mattie, welcome. We're so happy to have you, and the listeners get to learn your story.
Hi, Melissa. Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to be here with you.
Yes. And you, like many, I've continued to meet so many amazing ladies living with type 1 on social media. So that's where we connected. And as we'll unpack in this show, you and I have a lot in common with how we manage our day-to-day with diabetes, meaning multiple daily injections. But before we dive into that, why don't you give us just a quick overview of a little bit about yourself, and if you want to talk about your diagnosis story, that would be great too.
Yeah, awesome. So my name's Mattie. I'm 35 years old. I was diagnosed with diabetes at 12 years old. I'm coming up on my 23-year anniversary, Jordan year. So that's cool. I had it wasn't too tragic or traumatizing of a diagnosis. Luckily, I didn't get, very sick. My mother's dad was a diabetic, so she kind of saw the signs, very thirsty, going to the bathroom all the time, losing weight. So we were over at his house one day and checked my blood sugar, and it was 538. I still remember that number, and I didn't know what that meant. She said, did you eat anything? Did you have candy? Could there be sugar on your hands? So checked it again, still right around there. So we called the doctor and went to, the Children's Hospital in Orlando the next day. Um, and yeah, I was diagnosed with type 1 diabetes. I didn't know what it was.
Mm.
I hated shots. I have three other siblings, so there's four of us total, and it's kind of funny looking back at it now, but when you're a child and you have to get your shots at the doctor's office, I was the one child out of all of us who would have to be held down or
Mm.
try to run out from getting shots when it was my turn. So, and now I'm doing them myself.
That's
It's kind
crazy.
of wild how it turned, 360.
A little ironic, right? You've
Yep,
been challenged, and you have met the challenge because we have to, right? That's the question,
absolutely.
right? I know that's a one of those things that that we'll hear, especially with the shots. I think people will look at you and say, "I just can't imagine how you can do that." Right? That's kind of the feedback, the reaction people see if they actually can, watch us take our insulin shots. But yeah, well, you just have to step up to the plate and do what you got to do every day, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm
Yeah.
grateful that we have medicine to be able to do
Hmm.
that. So I try to look at it through, a grateful perspective, and that's really helped me.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, the glass is half full for sure, and it's definitely a lot fuller these days with just like you said, the technology. So speaking of technology, let's jump into what you and I have discovered about ourselves. Not only are we almost neighbors because we live maybe 2 hours apart here in Florida, which is so fun. So we do make plan. We will make plans to get together and meet in person. I know
Yes.
that will be great. Too easy to not do. So I remember there was a post on social, and I think it was my post. I think it might have been something I shared about being on MDI. And I remember your comment was, "Why are you not on a pump?" And that's what started our connection. And then I realized, looking at your profile and who you are and how you manage, that you yourself are on MDI. So the rest is history, and we'll continue with this discussion, I'm sure, as friends. But so what prompted you to ask me that question? Or was it just a matter of just trying to get a conversation going, just to see where I was, in comparison to maybe where you are, because you continue to be MDI as well?
Yeah, and we're using the same product, which is cool.
Hmm.
Um, and I'm just, you know, you were always MDI, right?
Yes, since day one.
Yes. And so I think that's what really triggered my curiosity about you
Mm. Hmm.
is why did you never ever try? And so I
Hmm.
think that that's really what it was. I was very curious.
Yeah, and it's a good question for sure. It's definitely something I get asked a lot, and I will never say never. We had Stormy Baxter was on the first show of this year on January 1st, and she's a pump trainer, amazing, and she's so cute because she continues to just to kind of reach out and stay in touch. And she's like, "I'm here whenever you decide that you want to take that step and get on a pump, just let me know." So I appreciate that encouragement. And in the same token, I appreciate the understanding that we decided what we do because, like myself, it's working. So the smart insulin pen that I use, that you use as well, it's very similar to the pen as far as the information and the freedom it gives us. So that's why, knock on wood, I just keep doing what I'm doing, and my A1C stays in line. And yeah,
If it's
so
not, and don't fix it.
no, exactly. If it's not broke, don't fix it. What's been the toughest? And I can think of a couple things right off the top of my head that make me more apt to maybe get closer at looking at a pump. One of the things is, okay, I'm 40, coming up on 42 years MDI, and scar tissue, insulin sensitivity, finding those sweet spots, and that's kind of a fun pun to throw into that. But that rotation I'm seeing after all these years it's getting a little harder, and I've got to get real creative. And again, we've got a lot of tissue on our body that is, some is better than others. Is there a specific area that, or what's your rotation schedule, I'll call it, or routine as far as shots, taking the daily shots?
I would say it probably depends on what I'm wearing.
Mm,
For years, I did not do them in my stomach. It was arms and like, your upper buttocks, like hip area.
mm-hmm.
And then I would say I'm, kind of all over with on my stomach. I rarely ever do my thighs just because your skin is thicker there.
Yeah.
So I tend to stay away from that.
Yeah, it
Um,
bleeds too. I noticed, yeah, there's a lot of
yeah.
veins in your legs as much as, yeah, that's a good point because I started to switch there. And I've mentioned on previous shows that my husband is also lives a type 1. So it's funny. This is a topic that we go around because we're usually taking our basil together in the morning, and he's got that same sort of rotation challenge, and his legs and mine too. I mean, I'll hit a vessel 9 out of 10 times. I'll hit a vessel. And it's funny, I'll do it more, I'll more apt do it in the wintertime when I have jeans on than I will in the summertime. And we wear shorts about 9 months out of the year down here, don't we?
Hmm.
So that's
Exactly.
just a girl speaking because I don't want to be showing some bruised legs, with blood vessels
Yeah,
popping.
it definitely
So
depends on kind of what we're
yeah.
wearing for sure.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, big influence. Yeah. You have mentioned that you have tried a pump before, and that was something. So tell us about that. What was that like? And why did you decide to switch back?
Well, I was diagnosed at 12, so started off, with the vials and syringes.
Mm-hmm.
Then I believe around 15, so 3 years later, going to the doctor, getting regular out of that honeymoon stage. Um, they told us about an insulin pump. And so I tried the insulin pump. I was in high school, and you know how that is when you're an adolescent and you don't want to be different from everybody. It's
Mm-hmm.
hard enough, and then throwing diabetes into the mix was I really felt different. Um, and I hated my diabetes. I hated that I had it. I was, why me, crying. I just absolutely hated it.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, wearing an insulin pump was just showing that on the outside, how I was feeling on the inside. Was
Yeah.
constantly trying to figure out ways to hide it. And, my parents are like, go to diabetes camp. And I'm like, no, the, those are weirdos. I'm not going there.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
and, there was only one other kid with diabetes at my high school, and he had a pump and he wore it proud. And, you see his tubing, and I was just like, that's pretty cool. But I just couldn't get there. I wish I went to diabetes camp, being around more kids that have diabetes, just seeing that it's normal and there's so many, other people out there. We have social media now, but in 2000, 2004, 2005, it wasn't like it is now.
Yeah,
Able
huge
to connect
shifts.
with
Yeah.
people. So it,
Mm-hmm.
it, it was really difficult. And I think that it was just my mental health, and just being at the age I was in, and not loving, obviously, having diabetes. So I actually did worse on it and just decided to get off of it. Then found out about traditional pens and was on those ever since, before I found the Inpen.
Yeah, my story is very, very similar. So, and it sounds like that other the young man that you went to high school with, maybe that was a little bit of an encouragement, knowing that he was able to. Yeah, it just goes to show you how different we all are too. Because I had that same sort of hiding it. I didn't even
Hmm.
know how to talk about it, so I just chose to hide it. So, and
Yeah, and
insulin
and
pens.
I would
Mm-hmm,
say, like, I was the weirdo. The kids going to
mm-hmm,
diabetes camps, they're not, like, I totally wish I would have done that. And
yeah.
I'm so glad that, other people go and do that, that it's still around. I still want to go to one. I don't know if they have adult ones, but I would
They
totally go.
do. They do, I've heard. Yes, most definitely. Yeah. Yeah, we'll have to look into those for sure. So at what point did it switch that mindset about because you're definitely not hiding it now. You're working in the community, and you advocate for this disease. So you're out there, and you are an open book. So do you remember when that kind of switched, or maybe it was gradual? I know for me, it was a little bit more gradual to be as transparent.
Well, I had my daughter when I was 21 years old, and I actually found out I was pregnant with her because I was in DKA.
Mm,
And I just wasn't taking care of myself for days without checking my blood sugar. So once I found out I was pregnant, this wasn't about me anymore, because now me not taking care of myself is affecting my child, and this is not their fault. And that was a turning point for me. She did save my life. And ever since then, I still have my ups and downs, but I've really, really tried my best to do the best that I can every single day. Um, and then having my second daughter 5 years ago, I started to get anxiety just because I've had diabetes for so long. And we can try to be perfect. We're never going to be perfect. And A1C is mine are great. But at the end of the day, our body is fighting a disease every single day. And that's wear and tear.
mhm,
And I became extremely like anxious, very worried, rage bolusing if my blood sugar didn't get down fast enough, just constantly, and just, a fight or flight mode for, I would say at least like a year,
mhm.
maybe two, after I had her. And that could have been hormones too, after having a baby, all of
Sure.
that. Then I found out about the Inpen um, on Instagram, and I was like, I have to have this. What is
Mm,
this? Like,
mm,
this is exactly what I need, because I'm not good at math, and I
mm,
don't want to do all of the math and the corrections. And I was rage bolusing and forgetting how much insulin I gave myself. So having the Inpen and that technology behind it kind of eased my anxiety that I was feeling. And I needed to tell everybody about this, because I don't want anybody else to feel how I was feeling. And so
mm.
that's really why I started advocating and sharing my story.
Yeah, yeah. Again, things always lead to a purpose, don't they?
Hmm.
Absolutely. And usually it's the tough stuff that leads us there, because that's how we learn about ourselves, and we can grow, and then we can help others with what we've gone through. So yeah, I can totally relate to all of that. You mentioned hormones, and I wanted to talk too about basal insulin. And this has been a hot topic on. I have a community over on the Honey Health Diabetes app, and this is really coming up. And we're going to be talking about this in some upcoming Zoom workshops that I'll be hosting. But the overnight insulin, for those of us that are doing multiple daily injections, again, it's a manual dose. And generally speaking, when we have those highs in the middle of the night, there's a lot of things that factor into that. And I know you can agree with that. It's about what we did during the day. It's the stress, it's the cortisol. Obviously, it's the food and insulin. It's so funny. We always look to the obvious, what we think is the obvious, which is the food and the insulin. But there's so many other factors that can affect basically how our body's going to respond. So, and that's what we're looking at. But you are, like, for instance, when we look at our reproductive system, and the different phases of our hormones, and this is something, when I was your age, because I had my daughter when I was 29, and even in earlier years, again, there's a lot of information. The doctors do what they can to provide the information, but I think there's still a lot, and this community is a great way to get that information and to learn from each other. But I was not understanding my insulin sensitivity changes throughout my menstrual cycle. And now I'm in menopause, which is what I'm helping to coach women on in this stage of life. So that's another whole variable that we're adjusting to. But is that something that you experience now? Can you speak on that as far as how you are noticing?
Yeah, absolutely. I didn't know the cortisol issue until I started doing ozone oxygen therapy, and I was
Mm,
working with a nurse practitioner. Um, and my experience with doing ozone, and I did, also consult with my diabetes, my endocrinologist first about doing it. Um, but I learned about it from her and from that experience, and the cortisol, what happens in the middle of the night, and that was the reason, my blood sugars are shooting up. Your what is it? Your liver holds on to the
the,
sugar
right, the
at
glycogen.
night, and
Mm-hmm.
then once you're sleeping, it just releases it. And I was constantly having those, and I mean for months, 400. Um,
Mm-hmm.
it was insane. And so obviously we're not getting good sleep during the day.
Mm-hmm.
So I have noticed that, but it also comes in peak or in different stages. I don't really know why some nights I'm more like this, more
Mm-hmm.
level. My sugars are level. And then others they're not. So it actually would be good to document that and like really
Mm-hmm.
kind of like see what you obviously we know what we ate during the day, but what were we experiencing?
Yeah.
Whether it's the menstrual cycle, whether you have a cold, um, stresses of daily life, things like that. But I definitely experience that, and I'm learning more about the cortisol and how
Mm-hmm.
that affects everything in your blood sugar for sure.
It sure does. And, that's part of what I continue to learn too, because I used to be a little bit more perfectionist. I think I have really my expectations were not realistic back in the day, and I kept my blood sugar way too tight. Again, this is continuing with injections, so it's harder to do with injections. But I managed to keep it way too tight, but not knowing all this other information because it led to so much frustration, just like you were saying with the rage bolusing. And now that the product that we both use now, the Inpen, which is giving us that, oh gosh, that's the best part of it, is just having that insulin on board and telling you when you took a shot. Having
Yeah,
that
it's
little
amazing.
helper. Yeah, really good
Absolutely.
feedback.
Yeah,
But
and
just to
the basil, I mean, you touched on that, being insulin sensitivity as well. I saw that when I did move to a plant-based, low fat, whole foods, diet or lifestyle, my insulin sensitivity got better. I was becoming more sensitive to it. I could lower, my insulin to carb ratio, or I guess maybe raise it, and then lower the
right.
basal. So I did notice that too, what you're putting in your mouth really matters. And, I remember at diagnosis, they said, eating a banana is the same as eating a piece of cake. It's the same sugar. And I grew up thinking that. And I like
Mm,
never ate fruit. I think I had my first kiwi like 3 years ago. I'm
oh,
not
that's
kidding.
crazy. Yeah.
So it does something different to your body that cake doesn't do, like, or
Yes.
does do. A banana and cake, yes, they have sugar, but one's natural. So
Mm-hmm.
just getting older and realizing those things. And, we're kind of our own doctor sometimes. So,
We sure
um,
are.
in the diabetes aspect and how we manage our diabetes, but also with everything else that we think about. I feel like I go into a deep dive sometimes, whether it's nutrition or the cortisol or all of these other things, because we're just kind of so used to having to do it on our own and kind of figure it out. And every single one of us are different.
You got that right. And then throughout the month we're different, and then as we age we're different. Yeah. And I think that's one of the most important things I learned, is that I had to let go of that expectation that I was always going to be able to keep it in control, because we do the best we can based on what we know, food, outside, the environmental influences on our blood sugar, and we make that dose. We take that dose. And luckily, we have the data to give us the feedback. There was times when I didn't get that feedback. I remember when I was pregnant with my daughter, and I tell this story. I was still doing finger pricks, using a glucometer. I made it work. You use what you have. Didn't know any different. CGMs were not invented yet, so I made it through a very successful pregnancy. A lot more work, a lot more tests, but it is something that we can do. But just to kind of let go of that control and know that, okay, make your decision, make your dose, eat that food, whatever that is. And that's another whole topic. And then knowing that we can just adjust accordingly, because guess what? We don't always get it right the first time. And I think that is maybe that speaks more to those of us that are still doing daily injections, because I do think an insulin pump gives you a little bit more help in that situation, and the fact that they are connected to CGMs and they can almost think for you, right?
Yeah, maybe it's a little more, hands off. You have
Mm-hmm.
somebody, it's not somebody, but something else in the
Something
background
else.
that
Mm-hmm.
um is, pushing something through so you don't have to think about it.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, and that might be another reason why I can still continue on injections, is I'm not ready. And I know there's different types of pumps that you can get. They're all built differently, and there's different settings that you can turn on and off. But that would have to be a learning curve for me. It's just letting go, because I'm so used to making the decisions around the dosing and all
Oh
of
yeah.
that. So
I have no clue about insulin pumps.
mm.
20 years ago is the last time I had one. Like, that's crazy.
And they've changed so much since then. That's for sure.
Yeah, some of
Yeah.
my friends, they were talking about a cannula, and I'm like, "What is that?" I have no
All the
clue what you're
pieces.
talking about. It's completely foreign to me. But then when I speak, about MDI, and I don't even think they knew what MDI was. I think I quizzed them on that. It was very funny responses.
I love that.
So we're all type 1, but we're almost like in our own little world.
Yeah, yeah, we definitely can be. I want to go back to what you were talking about as far as plant-based. So tell me the before and after, because I eat everything, animal protein and all of that, and I'm all about quality food and quality protein sources and all of that. I do the best I can to source that, and we eat a lot of vegetables, so we're very heavily, like the non-starchy, some starchy now and then. Again, it's all about just kind of factoring it into a meal, and how that balances out. So tell me about your before being maybe on some animal protein, because I think the first reaction I get, because I've never been plant-based, completely.
Hmm.
So I guess that surprises me that, yeah, just kind of paint a picture for us, because I'm curious as to, and maybe give us a couple examples of, say, your average breakfast or dinner or something like that.
So the plant-based journey kind of happened, I would say, almost right before I got pregnant with my daughter, like 5 years ago. Um, I got an office job. I was sitting more. I wasn't as active. I'm a snacker. I eat like a bird. I could literally take 2 hours to eat a meal and I'm fine with it. Like, that's just how I am. But you can't do that all the time while you're sitting, 8 hours a day, 7 hours, whatever, and not really working out. So I started to put on some weight, and I would say it was at least like 20 pounds. Then I was like, okay, this has to change. Like, my clothes aren't fitting. I don't like the way that I look. So I started working out a little more. And then I would just like eat no carbs. I was eating turkey and vegetables, like high fat, high protein, low carb. And then I started needing double to triple the insulin, to where I'm like, okay, I'm allergic to insulin. Not allergic, I'm sorry. Insulin doesn't work anymore. Like, why isn't it working? Um, then I was researching, and I started, getting these darkening under my armpits, um, the weight gain, the double the insulin. So, going back, what we were talking about earlier, kind of being our own doctors and doing this research, I was like, I have insulin resistance. Like, I have that. That's what's happening with me. I went to my endocrinologist. Well, actually, then I got pregnant. And so now I'm struggling with being pregnant and having diabetes also, and being, having this insulin sensitivity issue. And so the doctor actually put me back on like N and R. Like, syringes while I was pregnant. That is what I did the whole time. Then I started to see a high risk doctor, and my blood sugar was fine. My A1C was good, but I still was needing extra insulin. But again, I was pregnant. So then fast forward, I have my daughter. I'm like, I don't want to do syringes anymore. This is crazy. Went back to pens. And then I found out even more, I guess, about the insulin sensitivity and being resistant. I found a book that was Mastering Diabetes, and they do the plant-based, whole foods, low-fat lifestyle. And I noticed that they're both type 1 diabetics. One of them has another autoimmune disease. And I was like, okay, this is really cool. These guys have what I have. Let's try this. And so I listened to the book twice, and I just went straight in, like 100%, did not like kind of just fall into it slowly and try to adjust. I just went right into it. And when I did that, I started to have more energy. The darkening under the armpits went away. I started to lose weight. Before that, my doctor endocrinologist did give me metformin. So I was on metformin. I was able to stop taking 2 pills a day and just go down to one. And then eventually completely off of it just by changing what I was putting in my mouth. Also losing weight, which was really interesting as well, because I'm not a big like workout kind of girl. So it was nice to be able to lose some weight as well. But that's kind of how it all started. And then I was taking pictures of my food and posting it on my personal Instagram, and everybody was asking me for recipes. And I'm like giving people all of this info because I love helping other people and sharing. I was like, I need to have my own spot. That's about me, that's about diabetes, that's about plant-based. If they want to get a recipe, I'll put it on there, but I'll be real about it. Like, this one was gross, or this is what it looks like in the picture, and this is what mine looks like. And it's not pretty, but it's good. And so I wanted to have just like my own little space, for myself. And it just like really, really grew, very quickly. So I would say for 1 year, I was strictly plant-based. No meat, nothing. It was very hard as a diabetic to go out to eat because there's not a lot of vegan restaurants around here. And if they don't have vegan, or maybe they do, it's a pasta, right? So like pasta doesn't really work for me either. So when I became plant-based, it was like COVID. So we weren't really going out to eat anyways. But once that kind of laid off and we started going to restaurants, I was like, I can't have pasta. So I was like, I'll have some fish. So I could tolerate the fish. And then I'm like, okay, well, if I can have fish, then I can have some chicken. And so then I would have some chicken. So that's why I say I'm like maybe 80% plant-based, but I also try to be like really real about that. And the way I jumped into it was not sustainable. From my experience, I wouldn't, I would have everybody, if they wanted to try, like just go slowly, because it is difficult. But I definitely saw the advantages of it, 100% and pretty quickly, which was amazing to see, how everything kind of like leveled out, and it was all by what I was putting in my mouth.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my story. But if I want to have pizza with ranch, I'm going to have it. But just a lot more fruits, a lot more vegetables. I'm not a big breakfast person, and I don't know if you can relate to this, and it goes back to like those highs at nighttime. Having highs at nighttime, and I believe as soon as I put my feet on the floor, my blood sugar shoots up. Trying to like maintain that and get that level, along with like the morning stress of getting the kids ready and all of that. So I actually really don't eat breakfast. If I do, I will get like a plant-based, one of those shakes that have some protein in it. And so I'll do something like that. but now I have incorporated like some chicken and fish into my
Okay.
diet.
You're starting to kind of move it
Salmon,
back in.
yeah, definitely
Really
salmon.
good.
Love that. But just, still just try really just like the whole foods
Yeah.
aspect
Yeah.
of it.
Most definitely.
Still no
Yeah.
red meat. I used to eat red meat once a week,
Okay.
maybe twice a week. I was the steak queen.
That's funny.
It really was.
Right.
So
Right.
yeah, I've held that though, and it's been 4 years, no red meat. I think it
So
would make me sick if I even tried
it
it.
probably would if you introduced it today. Yes, most
Yeah,
definitely. Yeah. Yeah. Our body's not used to, yeah. Doesn't know
yeah.
what to
So
do with
long
that sort of
story
those
short,
enzymes. I
that's
love
how
it.
it all came
Yeah.
about.
And my thoughts when I hear about more of a stricter plant base, and is how to get enough protein in, because again, it tends to be more starchy. It's easy for me because I can speak for this. It's easy to get vegetables in because I just love
Hmm.
vegetables. I can fill a plate with vegetables, but trying to get that daily protein in, it's hard enough when you eat animal protein. It's got to be
Hmm.
really hard when you
And you'll
are
get it
relying
from the
on plant-based.
lentils and the beans. Like
Sure.
that's where you get it from. And
Mm-hmm.
I am, every time I go see my endo, he's like, more lentils, more beans. And I'm like, oh,
Mm.
okay. So it,
Yeah.
it it is difficult. And I did have to take a B12 like supplement.
Yeah, I was going to ask you. Yes, yes,
Hmm.
about supplements. B12 and iron is another one that tends to run low.
Hmm. Yeah.
Mm.
So I was having those, mhm. What? Yeah, in like 5 minutes, okay? Okay.
Yeah, and something else too. And this is funny because you and I both live in Florida, but D3, is that something you supplement for right now?
Yes. So I take vitamin D3 plus K2. I found a plant-based
Hmm.
one online that I use. I found it on Amazon. And it works. It works very well.
Yes, yes, it makes it more available to the bones, which is so important. Yes, that's exactly what I use too. It's combined with the K2. So what about so like basal rates? Is that something that you do your own adjustment on, or do you refer to your doctor?
I usually will adjust it myself.
Yeah, because I think that's something that can just having that autonomy over, understanding our body. I mean, I can definitely see it either way. And definitely if you're newly diagnosed because you don't know enough, you don't have enough history of what your body, how it's going to respond, like for you and I do a basal shot in the morning. I use Traceba, love it. But during menopause, I do my own adjustments. And when I say adjustments, it's not a big adjustment. It's like a unit, because it's very sensitive. It doesn't take much up or down with that dose to really see an impact. Again, what's happening overnight. And that's another part. And we're going to definitely be talking more about this in some of the workshops I have coming up, is what do we do with those overnight stubborn highs? And can we make these adjustments on our own? Do we have the tools to do that? And I think the number one thing we can do is just pay attention to the trends. And if you're questioning it, then, definitely get with your doctor just to make sure that that sounds like a safe plan, because it's all about safe, not to dose something that's going to put you in jeopardy with blood sugar.
No, absolutely. And now that, we have the Inpen and the data that it has and those reports,
Mm,
that you can either send to your doctor or they can have access to them. They can kind of see those trends. And so I mean, I kind of base mine off of, am I going low more often?
mhm.
Do I need to lower that? And so I will, get in the portal and send him an email, and let him know. But um, yeah, I definitely let him know, but I still go ahead and do it myself because it's immediate, right? Like
Mhm, mhm.
those blood sugars and having those lows maybe or those
Yeah.
highs,
Mhm.
you kind of need to do it.
Yeah. And I'm going to share a trick that I've actually shared this with clients. And again, take this with a grain of salt because this is just something that's worked for me personally. And I'm not advocating anybody's dosing decisions. But I'll use an example of a dinner that has a little bit more fat. pizza is a good example, right? Obviously. So if we decide to splurge and have some pizza with the cheese and just that delayed response with the carbohydrates, it usually happens about 2 a.m. Or another example that I've seen is salmon. Again, it all depends on portion size. But if I have a really healthy piece of salmon, maybe beyond the 3 or 4 ounces, and you're fine after dinner, you're fine until bedtime. And I've learned what I do is knowing that those carbs again, if this is part of the dinner, let's say I had a sweet potato with that meal, with vegetables or whatever, knowing that it's going to catch up. I will give myself before bedtime, again, depending on what that number is, 1 to 2 units of basil before bedtime. And that solves my morning high. Because again, it's just giving that little bit extra push and support. Again, expecting myself, to rise in the morning or overnight, to have that. So it obviously helps us sleep. So we're not waking up with that. And the good part too is obviously our CGMs have alarms on them. So, we can get notified if that happens to be a bad decision. But I have had nothing but success doing that. Just that 1 or 2 extra units of basil before bedtime can help cover what's going to end up, getting released later on as far as glucose into the system. So anyway.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't thought of that, at all, but I love that. I love that perspective. And, you know, I think it's okay to try those things. Obviously, talk to your doctor 100%.
Absolutely.
But when we have the CGMs and we have that data, and it can let us know, as well. It's a little bit more of like a protection as well
Mm-hmm.
for us
Mm-hmm. Most
in the middle of the
definitely.
night. I didn't know that about salmon, but that totally makes sense.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it's always salmon, like I can eat a lighter, flakier fish, which again, it's less fat, but that, those omega-3 pack, that piece of salmon is going to kind of hold on to those carbs a little bit longer, so the release of that sugar into the system is going to be delayed. So yeah, those are my two: salmon and pizza.
Yeah.
And I do my extra unit before I go to bed.
Chinese food too is a little bit of, and
Oh,
that one's kind of tricky.
that one is tricky.
Mhm.
Yes,
But
yes.
I feel like we all know that. We all have to
Sushi.
figure out what works for
Yeah.
us, especially with pizza. I mean, one day, it can be perfect. Like I nailed that. And then I could do the same thing and it's like, oh, it's over. But at least it was good.
That's right. Enjoy the short term and
Yeah.
adjust accordingly, right?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, is there anything, I always like to finish up the show. This has been great, just talking multiple daily injections and what we do, what works. And again, anything that you heard today, definitely consult your doctor. We don't give medical advice. We're just sharing what we've tried, what works, and just giving you some things to consider. So definitely consult your doctor. But yeah, is there any words of wisdom that you can share with our listeners before we wrap it up?
Yeah, I think one thing that I always like to say or that resonates with me is that every single day is different and just keep going. Tomorrow will be different.
Yeah.
Um, there's always tomorrow. And so we can try again. It's okay to have a bad day. But there's always tomorrow and just, be grateful for that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. Most definitely. Yeah, just appreciate all that we are doing because we're doing a lot. We are
We're
doing a
doing
lot.
a lot. And I don't think we give ourselves enough credit
That's true.
for
Yeah.
everything that we do.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. And it's like anything. I think it starts with gratitude, just being able to have, and hopefully this speaks to everybody that is listening. And if not, we understand, as far as the availability of different insulins and medical tools and all those things, it's something that we can't take for granted. So if we have it, appreciate it, and and just think of all the ones that don't have access to it at this point. And just say a prayer for them that, one day that they can have the same advantages that we have to manage a disease that needs assistance. So really,
Absolutely.
really grateful for that. Yeah. Well, so how can our listeners find you and connect with you?
Well, I'm on Instagram and TikTok, but I'm mainly on Instagram. My handle is plant-based pancreas. So you can find me on Instagram on that or on TikTok.
Yeah, and I'll definitely link all that in here. Yes, you've got some great content, and I just appreciate all you share about yourself personally, and you're journeying with T1 Day, so I appreciate it. Well, thanks again, and definitely check out Mattie on Instagram, and please share this show. I think this was a good topic. So if you know of somebody else that is living with type 1 diabetes, or maybe also on MDI, and they need a little bit of support, because it tends to be of insulin therapy choice that doesn't get a lot of attention, but it's important that it does, because there are many of us that are choosing to manage our diabetes this way. So definitely share this show with anybody else that could to get this information in front of them. So until next week, have an amazing day, and bye for now. Thanks for tuning in to the Type 1 and Midlife podcast. And be sure to subscribe, rate, and review right here on iTunes. And you're invited to connect with our Type 1 and Midlife community on the free Honey Health app. Here we discuss the podcast topics in a group chat, a chance for you to ask questions and take action on what we share here on the show. You can find the app link to download for free right here in the show notes. And for free resources, you can visit me at abundanthealthwithmelissa.com. And your support means so much. Thank you.